Hey friends, how's everybody doing? Well, I did that short yesterday on track saws, and you guys were like, let's hear about track saws. So here we are. I'm not saying that I know everything about track saws. Let's just throw that out there because obviously we know that wouldn't be the case. I do have some input, which I hope everyone will find useful. Uh, it's kind of a sea of poop out there as to, you know, if you're in the market for a track saw where you get the track, the saw, the clamps, the blah 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 blah, you're in for a ride. So I just wanted to go over kind of the thought process that I went through before I purchased a track saw. Ended up with obviously the Makita, which I've been very, very happy with. Super accurate, gives you the ability to make cabinets out in the field if you need to, which we'll get to this later. And I said in the short yesterday that I've been making homemade. So I think I want to start with the homemade. Because it has a lot of advantages, and it has advantages that I think the manufactured track saws don't necessarily have. It's very versatile. Clamps can get in the way, but I mean, for a long time, I mean, even with the straight edge, you know, you can do a lot with a little. I always stress that you can do a lot with a little, and I've been there. For the longest time, I had something that, well, I had a 3-foot. I called it a cutoff jig for doors. Same type of guide. I had a 54-inch guide for cutting across sheet goods, and I had something that was about 100 inches to cut the length on sheet goods. So, second thing I really wanted to say was there is no substitute for finesse and talent and heart and wanting to make something good. You can have the best tools in the world, and if your heart isn't in it, and if you don't have the desire to make something cool, it's unlikely that that's going to happen. So anyway, let's go over a homemade track, just a basic homemade track. We'll start with your power saw. That's the most important thing. If you have a crappy power saw, oh gee, this has liquid nails on the bottom. If you have a crappy power saw, that's probably what you ought to change first, because your cuts with the track are only going to be as good as your power saw. I like DeWalt power saws, and I like the commercial grade. I don't like the stuff that the box stores sell. They're too light duty. They would still work for this. The DeWalts that I use are heavier. They lightened up the DeWalts to sell at the box store because not everybody wants to tote a heavy saw around. I've just been using it for 20 years, and I think it's the best 7¼ inch power saw out there. I've cut some crazy stuff with it, crazy thick, and it's just super accurate and rugged. So that's my spiel on a DeWalt power saw. So you start with that, and the thing that you want to make sure, and it doesn't have to be this giant precise thing. These are plenty precise. This is an Empire Speed Square. Samson makes a good one. I have an old Craftsman that I've had for years. But what you want to do is you want to start with a brand new blade. You want to start with a brand new high quality blade. I do like Diablo blades. DeWalt blades are good as well. Anyway, back to the square. So with your power saw, just a regular old power saw, Make sure you get that new blade on there, and make sure you are square from the saw base to the blade. Push the depth all the way in and carefully adjust your tilt on your saw until you're square, as perfect as you can get it. And be careful not to, at the saw teeth, be careful to move the blade so that you don't have the thickness of the carbide. Because the carbide, if this is the blade, the carbide sits on either side, so you'll be out of square. If you run this up against a tooth, you'll be that much out of square, which is small, but it's still out of square. The whole idea is to be able to make long, precise cuts on sheet goods safely. And even when I have a lot of sheet goods to process in the shop, I use the track on the workbench set up on 2x4s to not cut into the bench. But I don't, even though this is an enormous table saw, just one guy flipping around plywood isn't easy. And so this way you can throw it up on the bench, you can lay it out, and with the track saw, you're putting, basically the whole idea and point of it is to, whether it's homemade or brand of tools that I will never buy, you put that track right on your mark, clamp it down, and you make your cut, and it's right on the money. And that's a lot of confidence. When you can do that on the job, that gives you a lot of confidence, whether it's do it yourself or on the job getting money for it. It gives you confidence. It makes your work that much better. It's one less thing that you have to worry about on the job. You can focus on layout. You can focus on installation. So it's a really good thing. So anyway, let's get to what the most basic model, and this is kind of this is for my drill press, but this illustrates what it actually is. It's a piece of plywood. I like to use 1/2 inch at the thickest. I prefer 3/8, but you're basically just cutting a piece of plywood that's wide enough so you can just let it run wild. But you want your edges straight and parallel. So you are going to need a table saw to pull this off. And you're going to be, the more particular you are about how you put this together and what you do, the better results you'll get when you're actually using it. So anyway, I usually run this to about 2.5 inches, and I run this maybe 2 inches wider than the wide part on my power saw, this part. Now on a regular power saw, it isn't cut off here. There's an extra 1.5 inches or so, and we'll get to that later. So anyway, this you can make your own. It's basically a batten. You can go to the trim department somewhere and pick up a piece of lattice, or you can get some solid stock and make your own. But this has to be straight. Rip your plywood to length, and you're pretty much set to go. Now you're gonna need fasteners, because you're gonna take carpenter glue, and you're gonna glue, and you're gonna nail or screw this to this. And usually what happens is that no matter what, unless you're using those 23 gauge brads and you can get something in there that's that short that won't come through the backside, you will need to sand your fasteners. On the one that I used, the aluminum stock, I ended up using the smallest bugle head screws that I could find, and then I had to take my belt sander and grinder. I ground the tips down and then belt sanded the whole backside flat, so I wasn't scarring up my workpiece. So anyway, what you'll do is you'll measure your your 2.5 inches this way, and you'll measure your saw plate to the blade plus another 2 inches. And you'll lay this out on a piece of plywood. Just give yourself enough. Just give yourself enough so that you have plenty. So these two sides are parallel. So make a mark, measure in, make a mark, measure in, make a mark. Now don't scribe along. Theoretically, that should be perfect, but if it's not, that's going to cause a problem. If you scribe along this edge, you're going to follow whatever this is. So you've got your mark here, and you got your mark here. And so take your chalk line or a straight edge, something that you're confident that is perfectly straight, and you'll have to have a long straight edge if you're doing a ripper track. Snap your line, and that will give you straight business. What you can do then, when you put this lattice on, make up your mind if you're covering the line, splitting the line, or leaving the line, and be consistent all the way down the board. The shorter the piece, the less margin there is for error. However, just, the more, like I said, the more attention and the more fastidious you are about it, the better the outcome with this piece. So once you have your line, and you're sure, because what you're going to do is when this is on and glued and straight, you're going to take your saw and you're going to run your saw and cut off the excess. And with this being straight, this is going to tell you right where that blade is. So what it's going to allow you to do is when you've marked out your board, got your mark here and your mark here, you put your jig down on your 2 marks, and you don't have to snap a line or anything. You have the confidence of knowing that that's going to be a rock solid line, and you can rip a piece of plywood. If you have a really nice blade in there that leaves a good finish, you're ready to make a cabinet carcass. You can get stuff down so you can get it in the chop box and start making cross cuts. But I've built cabinets in the field this way, and it works terrific. That gets us our track. So we'll just kind of review. I've got a 3/8 to 1/2 inch piece of plywood base for this. And I'm ripping it, and I'm getting these guys as parallel as I can and as straight as I can. I've got my 2 inch to 2.5 inch piece of lattice, and keep this thick. Keep it 1/4 inch to 5/16. Don't make it really tall, because you don't want, when you're at a deep depth, you don't want your motor on your saw to bottom out on this. So you snap your line, you put glue and screw. You just want this to not move ever. So you want it glued and you want it attached with fasteners. Then you run the saw base through here. You're cutting off, so you know. Let's think of it this way. So, yeah. Your wide part from your blade to your base, that's this side. So when you cut this part of the jig would be the inside portion of the tooth of the blade within the deflection, and it is a power saw, so it's only so accurate, but it's going to get you within less than a 1/16, let's put it that way. So what you can do now with your other side is you can run your short side very carefully. Try not to tip your saw. And so now you have another option for cutting. And I'll get to this too. These can be multifunctional as well. These can be set up, which my right angle thing is actually the one that I showed you that has the Formica on the bottom, is set up for a router. So that pretty much covers the basics of making a track for yourself. It takes a little time. You can probably make it in an hour, 2 hours tops. And I mean, if you've got a lot of scrap around, it's literally going to cost you nothing. Extremely accurate. What can you say? You're potentially using a saw that you already have. If you're gonna do this and you don't have a really good 7 1/4 saw, I would recommend picking up a nice saw. And a power saw is a personal preference. Like I said, I'm a DeWalt guy. When it comes to saws, with the exception of this Makita right here, I'm a DeWalt guy. So anyway, let's move on to more of an upgraded homemade one. Here's my upgraded homemade. I went and got some aluminum track, and the hardest thing about this was getting countersinks in this aluminum, because high-speed steel countersinks and aluminum, they don't like each other. The aluminum builds up on the countersink, and it prevents it from cutting. So that was quite a task. These screws need to be below the surface, so you have to get these countersunk. You can't have any heads above the surface. What I did was I got some 2-inch stock. I guess it's 1/8 of an inch stock. Yes, it's 1/8 of an inch. 1/8 of an inch by 2 inches. And I got some angle. And basically it's the same setup. I did my measurements, snapped my line, was real careful about putting this on. There was no glue, I just screwed it in. I did a lot of screws instead of glue. The thing that I don't like about this is that the saw base has a bit of a hard time. There's a little too much friction here. So if I had that to change, I think I would eliminate this this angle, and I would go up to 1/4 inch aluminum stock and just mount that like I installed on the other one. I thought this was going to be a stupendous idea, and it was a marginal idea. It was okay. This is great when you're on a job site or you're at home, but when you've got 85 pieces of MDO, 3/4 inch MDO, and another 125 pieces of MDF, 3/4 inch to process, you've got to have something that works better than this. So that's a production. This is kind of a limitation. Would this be sufficient on a house job site? Absolutely. The most useful thing for these guys, for you carpenters and whatnot, is stashing one of these in your truck or your van or your car that's 3 foot long, and it makes trimming doors a snap. A track saw is even better, but it's a nice tool to have in your arsenal. So anyway, that is this. It's just basically aluminum stock. So really a summary on this is just eliminate the angle and just build it like the one I just showed you, and make this thicker, and find a countersink that is going to work better in aluminum than just a normal countersink. This is also set up, this other side is also set up for a router. Not every router, but again, like the saw, it's got to use the same router every time with the same bit, but it will work on a piece of plywood. You can make an 8-foot straight run with your router as well. This one is set up for right angles, and this I did use the angle on, and it works really well because the base of the router, it glides on this Formica and it runs up against this, so it ends up making a really nice situation. So you can really get creative with this when you make your own stuff. You can make custom jigs with this. This is sort of the beginning of making templates and whatnot, where you can make a template and use double stick tape, then trace your whatever you're cutting, and then run it through a jigsaw or a bandsaw and stay just a little bit off the line, and then take a flush trimming bit and clean up the edge, and then you have a perfect piece, and you don't have to work at sanding and sanding and sanding. It's just boom, done, which is always nice. So anyway, that covers as much as I know how to cover. I'm thinking, did I leave anything out? Did I leave anything out? You're going to need 2 clamps. You can get squeeze clamps or the old traditional bar clamps, the pony clamps. The squeeze clamps are very convenient. You want to have a clamp though. You don't want your clamp sticking up because potentially the saw is going to get in the way. And you don't want to be in the middle of a cut and have the motor of your saw hit the clamp. It's a real buzzkill. So anyway, I hope this helps. I hope it gives somebody some ideas, because basically, you know, at the most, let's say you have to buy a sheet of plywood. At the most, this is going to cost you $50. You know, unless you have to buy a new saw. It might cost you a new blade, but still, I mean, I think you're well within $50 on this scenario. And this is good. It's really good. Used it for years. So anyway, enough about that. How's everybody doing? I hope you all are good. I'm plugging away. I'm here in the shop, trying to stay warm. Feeling very grateful about being in the shop. Feeling really grateful about all of the cool people that stay in touch with me. I mean, it's just really great. You guys are awesome. Getting some new subscribers. I'm up to 83. Woohoo! Headed towards 100. Nick Pixel said, I get my own URL. YouTube gives you your own channel URL when you reach 100. So I'm gonna have that, my own URL. That's awesome. My own internet address for my YouTube page. So I got that going for me. Yeah, thank you, new subscribers. The last few weeks of making a point to get content out has really opened my eyes, and kind of you kind of get in a mindset, and you get into this is getting incorporated into the daily routine. So it's my hope that I can really keep putting out consistent comments. It's my hope that I can really keep putting out consistent content and get consistent comments. So, yeah, everybody's names have just escaped me. But thank you all. Remember to be kind and be helpful and reach out to people and just spread the love and the happiness so that it makes this darn place a good place to live. It's really the Pixel live feed last night with Tasman. That was so great. Doesn't Nick Pixel know how to interview? And Taz, you were there, man. You're an inspiration. What else can you say? I don't need to add any more to that. It's just straight up, flat out inspiration. So, anyway, we're on to the second part. I'm going to go into as much as I can going to go into the manufactured track saws and my opinion-based thoughts. So, everybody, I have a splinter in the palm of my hand. I'm working on it. Sorry, I didn't mean to. I didn't mean to get distracted, but it was hurting. So, take care of yourselves and stay safe. And if you're thinking about starting a YouTube channel, it's awesome. It's definitely a great way to communicate, and a great way to, if stuff is kind of getting bottled up, it's a great way to, like, get some of it out there. So take care of yourselves, and I'll see you soon.